Hello and welcome to the Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray. And today we have with us someone that it's a topic I really want to discuss. And if you listen to the morning show, morning offering at 8 o'clock, you have heard a very brief interview with this guest. But it's a topic that I think really deserves us to delve into a little bit deeper, and that's what we like to do here on the Virtuous Life. So today we have with us Matthew McKenna. He's a PhD candidate in theology at Ave Maria University. He studies and teaches on the works of St. Thomas Aquinas, G.K. Chesterton, and Tolkien. His dissertation is in progress, and it explains the link between the masculine genius and the priesthood. So I'd love to just talk with him about that. But today we want to focus on his article that was in Catholic Exchange called Why Recreational Drug Use is Immoral. Matthew, great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Well, Matthew, before we jump into the topic itself, can you talk to us a little bit about this dissertation that is in progress? Like, what kind of got you thinking about this? And how are you developing this? Can you give us a little insight into it?
Well, of course, yeah. Throughout my whole life, I think I've been very interested in topics and questions of like masculinity, femininity, what does it mean to be a man and manly and woman and womanly. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the culture is radically confused about these topics and doesn't have any good answers. And so, when I was doing my PhD in theology, which I'm finishing up now, about to defend my dissertation in a few months, I knew I always wanted to write something about masculinity vaguely. And as it came time, it's the big theological focus or topic regarding this would be something like Christ and the priesthood. Only men can be priests, women can't. This is very controversial in the church, even though JP2 said the conversation was over and he gave the answer. But, that seems to just make things more controversial if anything. And so that's a very good way, it seems, to approach the topic of masculinity. And actually, it turns out that the church, when JP2 issued his declaration in the 90s, Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, which was the definitive declaration that the church only has the power to ordain males as priests, he actually, in a follow-up document, invites us to reflect on what this means about masculinity and femininity. If only men can be priests, which the church said this is the way Christ established the priesthood. Christ made the sacraments, of course. They were all instituted by Christ in his life. Holy orders, the priesthood, especially at the Last Supper. Council of Trent, of course, says when he said, "Do this in memory of me," that's when Christ ordains the apostles priests. And then, throughout the New Testament, we see them laying hands on other men and making them priests. And of course, when the apostles in Acts of the Apostles, when they're replacing Judas, they look for a man. I think the Greek term for America is aner, but it's particularly not just we need a person to replace Judas, but we need a male to replace Judas. And so the church asks us, this is a thing. This must tell us something about masculinity and femininity. Think about that. And it turns out nobody did that because, it's scary and controversial and hard to do. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Oh, I like that because I think you're right. This is one of the, things that on this show at times I've had various people on, to talk about masculinity, femininity, and it really, it seems obvious, but yet when you get kind of into the weeds on it, you get confused, because you always have these exceptions, right? I mean, because we tend to define men and women by specific characteristics of their personality or what they like to do, their hobbies or their verbal skills and that's true, but that's not the totality of it. So it really, what appears should be very clear has really gotten muddied over time. And I often wonder that, when this whole concept of gender was introduced versus our sex, you're either male or female, if that is when all of this started to kind of get muddied for people as a whole, and for me, I was raised on a farm, and I would suspect maybe people would have classified me as a tomboy. I drove tractor, did stuff like that, but I was never confused that, like, because I was doing these things, that must have meant that I'm more of a man than I am a woman. So I don't know. I'm really, really interested in your dissertation and I like the term you use, masculine genius, because we never hear that. I've never heard that stated that way.
Yeah, that's of course it's like an adaptation of JP2's term, the feminine genius, which he develops a little bit, but not once did he ever talk about the masculine genius. It never comes up.
Yeah, and I find that very fascinating. And before we jump into what we're really supposed to be talking about today, can you tell me, like, it's been a while since I've read those documents from JP2. I read them a while back, but can you tell me, like, why? Have you ever read anything that said this is why he never really talked about masculine genius and only focused on feminine genius? I mean, do you have any insight into that?
A little bit. And the insight there is he's the one, of course, that in the 90s issued the definitive proclamation, Ordinatio Sacerdotale, saying only men can be priests, women cannot do this. It's not possible. We don't have the power to make women a priest. That, of course, made a lot of people very upset, accused the church of sexism, misogyny, backwards thinking, being stuck in, like, the sexist past and things like that. And so JP2 is, of course, very interested in defending the church and Christ from the charge of sexism, because, of course, if Christ is sexist, then the whole faith's a lie, because Christ is a sinner, and then the sinner can't save us from sin, and everything just goes away instantly. Like, we lose everything.
It implodes.
And so he really wanted to, everything implodes. And so he really wanted to almost show this wasn't sexist by highlighting the proper role of woman, and especially focusing on how this is a dignified, noble role. So one strategy that a lot of the early feminists used in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, like during the time when the term gender as opposed to sex was being developed and introduced in society, was the denigration of traditional feminine values, characteristics, traits, roles, things like that. And they're very explicit about that. Like you can go back and read the early writings. They're explicit about, like, we want to make fun of traditionally feminine things in order to get women away from them, so to speak. And so JP2 wants to highlight that no, like, femininity, although women can't be priests, women are still awesome and, like, really, really important and radically necessary for, well, human society, human family, the church, so, like, the supernatural society. So even if they have a different role, it's still, the role they do have is necessary, totally equal in dignity and value, et cetera, things like that.
Okay, got it.
So I think, like, the ratio then for his focus on femininity was highlighting the importance and goodness of femininity, because it seems like when he says women can't be priests, it seems like he's devaluing
women. Right. I got it. Yeah. And I think, that has been, and I always say I forget what wave of feminism we're on now, but there's always a new wave. I don't, So, but I think my thing is so often we don't understand that there is gift in womanhood. There is gift in these. You don't, because I think for so long feminism was all about power. Power, and in order to have power, you had to be like a man, and it was a worldly power. It wasn't understanding the creative power that God gives to woman, and doesn't give that same type of creative power to man. They both obviously come together for this, but yeah, it's just been it's been kind of interesting to watch this unfold over my lifetime and try to figure out a lot of times, how did we get here? And why are we trying to make it so confusing? When I was growing up, it tended to be so clear. But yeah. So anyway, thank you, Matthew, for letting me kind of go off track here because I'm really interested in this dissertation. I think this sounds really, really interesting. Can I ask, before we delve into your article, can I ask, what kind of resources, who are you looking to as you, besides obviously JP2, as you develop this dissertation, especially focusing if you're looking at this masculine genius? Are there certain people you're looking to for this?
Yeah, yes. So my main strategy was almost to do a massive Catholic literature review, which is basically to say, well, what is the tradition of the church said about things like this? So I do, of course, have a large section on JP2, and of course, he doesn't say a lot about masculinity, so sometimes it's kind of tricky to find what he thinks there, but he does say some things. There's a big focus on Thomas Aquinas, actually, mainly in his Pauline commentaries, because St. Thomas Aquinas actually, he's known for the Summa Theologia, but also, and maybe even more important to him, he wrote commentaries on every letter of St. Paul, in their entirety. And we have almost all of them still, and almost all of them in all their entirety. And St. Paul talks a lot about male and female, the roles of men and women and family in the church a lot. So he actually has a lot to say there about masculinity, femininity. It's only one sentence here, one sentence there, but we put it all together, it ends up being a lot. So he's a big figure, as well as some of the other church fathers like Augustine, Jerome, Ambrose have a lot to say about this, actually, usually also in the context of commenting on Scripture. And then also figures like Edith Stein. Now, she, of course, also mainly talks about women. You can get the volume of her essays on the woman. But, there are comments in there, here and there, sentence here, sentence there, about, therefore men are like this, women are like this, therefore men are like this. And so she has some great things to say there.
Yeah. Okay, well, those are great resources. You can't go wrong when you're talking about the early church fathers and the saints. Kind of what my project kind of tries to show is, as it turns out, the entirety, 100% of the fathers of the church, the doctors of the church, every saint, all four female doctors of the church too. So that's, of course, Hildegard, Teresa of Avila, Catherine of Siena, and Therese of Lisieux. Actually, every single person agrees on at least some basic fundamentals here. And then we can use those basic fundamentals to try and understand the priesthood better. But as it turns out, if you dig deep, everybody in the Catholic tradition, including every pope ever who talks about this, everybody actually agrees in fundamentals. Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that with me and with the audience. So now let's dig into your article that you wrote, Why Recreational Drug Use is Immoral. First of all, I just want to start by asking, why did you decide to do an article on this?
I think the types of questions I usually want to engage with, theologically, philosophically, as you can tell from my dissertation, are things that matter to me, that are things that issues that are facing me, my friends, my colleagues, people in my generation. I wonder, here we have this issue today. What wisdom does the church have to help us figure this out better, help us live better? And so, it was just kind of a big issue, actually. It's a big issue in the world today. So I thought, okay, what does the church have to say about this? What does the wisdom of the saints have to say about this? How can they enlighten us about this particular topic? So really, it's just looking out and thinking, this is actually a pretty big issue that people are talking about. How can we approach this as a Catholic?
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I've just been amazed at how quickly states have ratified, or made legal, I guess, the use of recreational drugs. I mean, it's gone like wildfire. And so can you share with our audience a little bit of the statistics you found on this? I know you talked about it on the morning show, but I want to kind of review it so that people know why this is something we should be talking about.
Yeah, so the statistics from 2 or 3 years ago, I don't have super current, but from 2 or 3 years ago, it was 20% of Americans are using marijuana at least annually. So that's 1 in 5 people walking down the street are using marijuana, at least sometime, regularly. And among those, about 5 or 6% of the whole American population has a clinically diagnosable disordered use of cannabis, of marijuana. So some kind of very harmful, of course nowadays, modern day, in order to have a clinically diagnosed non-diagnosable disorder, like it has to be super, 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 super bad. You only
Right.
get the clinical diagnosis of a disorder when it's like horribly affecting your life. But about 5 or 6% of Americans actually have a marijuana use disorder, clinically speaking. So like it's 1 in 20 people walking down the street are being horribly affected by the use of marijuana. And that's just like one recreational drug. And then like another one that's like big on the rise are going to be psychedelics of all types. And 1 in 4 Americans use them or like have used them at some point, really used them at some point. That's also like a very significant portion of the population.
That is. And I find this very interesting. And I know you may not have done this, but I'm going to ask anyway. When you looked at statistics, just to see how serious of an issue this really is, did you see anything with driving under the influence of drugs? Did you see anything like that? Because we hear all the DUIs under the influence of alcohol, but did you see anything under drugs?
I remember, I don't have particular statistics on this on hand, but I do remember seeing at some point that there was a rise of DUIs for like marijuana, because DUI traditionally means like alcohol, driving under the influence of alcohol, but of course like driving and operating heavy machinery shouldn't be done when you're high either. It's probably worse when you're high actually than when you're just drunk, especially if it's like a really crazy drug, something like a psychedelic or something, or cocaine, something very intense. But I do remember seeing there was a rise in people driving under the influence of marijuana, like as it becomes more socially acceptable and people start using it more and more regularly. And of course, like driving under the influence, and you can't drive well, and you get in accidents. So that is growing. There's a growing.
That's growing too. Yeah, then that makes sense. I mean, if use is growing, then I'm sure, alcohol has not changed people, habits sometimes of driving, although it may have a little, but I can't imagine. I would tend to think marijuana would even be more so that I drive, that I don't notice an issue. But
there was an article I saw a little while ago that people are very, like the culture is very opposed to driving while drunk driving. Like that's kind of like a big taboo thing. Don't do that, because we've had so much good like social marketing campaigns and stuff like that. But most people think even if they're a little high on marijuana, they think they can drive better. So there's not quite the social taboo about like driving while high as there is driving while drunk, even though like the effects are more or less the same.
Yeah. So tell me, because even when like I'm in Ohio, and there was kind of a debate, was this got on the ballot, should we allow it? Shouldn't we allow it? And morality never came up. It was always more, discussing, what it does to the person's health, or, what it could do, like we were just talking about, accidents, et cetera. Or the whole thing of economics, right? If this is something then we can tax and, keep track of. But no one ever mentioned it really as a moral issue. Why is it important to talk about it as a moral issue?
For a couple of reasons. The main reason, I think, is, this might be a rather dumb answer or not helpful answer, but because it is immoral. Like by that we mean because it is sinful, which of course, like when you understand what we mean when we say something sinful when it's immoral, we mean this action does not lead to human flourishing, naturally or supernaturally. Like this action is it's contrary, it runs directly opposed to the purpose for which God made you. And so when you do this type of action, you hurt yourself, you hurt your human nature, you hurt your relationship with Christ, you hurt your relationship with other people, and you don't get fulfilled. You don't become happy by this type of action. So I think that's the main reason. And then secondly, like some people try to separate morality and law. Like, oh no, we don't legislate morality. That's a really dumb thing to say, actually. Like murder is illegal because it's wrong. Same with like racism, things like that. Like, so we're happy to say this is unjust, right, which is to say immoral, and therefore should be illegal. But when it comes to like my own personal actions that I do in my own home, we somehow try to remove morality out of the equation. But of course, that appeal is only made, people only make the appeal, don't legislate your morality when they don't accept or don't agree with your view of what's right and wrong. So all that claim really means is, I don't think this is wrong. Therefore, it should be legal.
Okay. So this is kind of a conundrum here that, and I have my students discuss this in class, because we certainly talk about, and they do this, they compare, and that's why they use the word recreational. They compare recreational drug use to alcohol, right? Having a drink with friends when you go out to a bar or out to eat. So the question is, the question that we discuss in class is the use of alcohol ever virtuous? And I would probably beg to add now, is the use of a recreational drug, does it depend on the circumstances of the act, or is it the act itself that is immoral? So is there a comparison here between talking about alcohol and talking about recreational drugs, or should we be looking at them differently?
There is definitely a comparison, right? That's why we all instantly want to make it. And as we've already noticed in our conversation today, there are similar effects of both of them. But there's also distinction. They're not exactly the same. And the big difference seems to be that alcohol has a very gradual effect on the person. Okay. And that you're not just drunk or not drunk. There's just kind of a gradual change going on there. While with most recreational drugs, that really isn't the case.
Okay. So
and that seems to be a pretty critical difference.
Okay. So you're saying if somebody smokes a joint, right? Are they immediately, and see, you can tell someone who's never used drugs. I'm clueless on this. Although, I saw what drugs have done to my students. But if somebody smokes a marijuana joint, are they high? Are they considered high automatically versus I have a glass of wine and I'm not really drunk?
Yeah. Maybe not immediately high, but there's much less of the gradual ascent with something like marijuana. For alcohol, you have one drink, you might not feel anything. 2 drinks, you might feel something, but that doesn't actually affect you really. And so there's a very gradual descent, I guess, into drunkenness where you totally lose all control. Marijuana, that's much, much, much steeper. So there might be a small amount that you could smoke, half a joint or something, and maybe still not be horribly affected. But it's very, very that change is very, very steep cutoff. You're going to get just high very quickly.
Okay. So, and Matt, what do you say to people? I want your insight into this since you wrote this article. What do you say when people, because we heard this all over the place when they were trying to legalize recreational drug use, just this whole argument that, we already allow people to drink and we really don't put a limit on what they can drink. They can't go out and drive drunk, but we don't put a limit on it. If they want to get blitzed in their house every night, nobody says anything about that. So why can't we do the same thing with, let's just stick with marijuana. With marijuana, that I'm not gonna get behind a wheel and drive so that it affects other people's lives. I'm just gonna smoke the joints in my house. So if you're allowing me to do this with alcohol, why can't I do it with this other substance? How do you answer?
Yes, I think I think it's a really good objection. And there's a lot of very modern presuppositions in an objection like that, in the thought process like that. The first, most obvious one would be something along the lines of, just because you're not harming other people doesn't mean it's not bad, right? So the modern assumption of morality is something like the harm principle, where as long as I'm not harming another unwilling third party, my action isn't bad, it's not wrong. And so I can do whatever I want to myself in my own home as long as I'm not hurting people. That's just a very modern notion of what's right and wrong. But actually, a more Catholic notion would say, actually, if you're not harming other people, first of all, you probably actually are, right? This is what St. Paul teaches us. Don't you know, your sin affects the whole body of Christ? So even if you are in your own home committing sin, you actually are hurting the whole church, even if you don't recognize it. So there's that. But also, the actions that are just hurting yourself, that's still bad. That's still wrong. And so then that kind of brings us to the next point that actually, actually somebody is saying that you shouldn't actually get drunk every night in your home. That somebody is like Jesus and Paul and the entire Bible that very strongly warns against drunkenness all the time, not just because of what the harm you'll do to other people, but because of the harm you do to yourself. Because not just the physical bodily harm of like alcohol poisoning, but the moral, spiritual harm, the destroying of your relationship with Christ, the destroying of your relationship with your family, the abandoning of your use of reason, your rational faculties that God gave you, and by which you interact with Him in the world. And so, like, somebody is saying you shouldn't do that, but we're just not like making it illegal or stopping you. We, kind of like we said earlier, we do legislate morality, as in like things that are immoral can be also made illegal, but not everything that's immoral is or even should be illegal, right? Because laws are supposed to basically a principle of law from Thomas Aquinas is that the human law that we create, the civil law, can't demand perfection because none of us are perfect. And so if the human law demanded perfection, we'd all be in jail. That's not feasible setup for society. And so human law can't forbid all evil or command all good. And so just because maybe the law can't outlaw drunkenness in your home, you still shouldn't do it. But that's why we have things like the church and Christ coming and teaching us that.
Yeah, excellent. And when people, I remember having this conversation with people before the vote here in Ohio, and I said, so let me get this straight. Just because, you're allowed to drink until you get drunk in your house, you want to add another thing to that? That's you're arguing that that's a bad thing. You're not saying it's a good. You're saying, well, if we can do this and it's bad for you, why can't we do this and it's bad? I said, so we're adding another bad. Is that really what we want to do? Because rarely did anybody make an argument that it was good for you. That it's, this recreational drug use, this marijuana is great for you. I never heard that. You heard a little bit with medicinal use, people that with pain or whatever, but that's how it started. It started under medicinal use, and then it didn't take long before it swung into, just let everybody use it whenever they want. So Matt, well, I'm going to take a break, and we're at break already. This has gone so fast. When we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to delve into the 3 reasons that you give and go in some depth there. But I want everybody to know our guest today is Matthew McKenna, PhD candidate in theology at Ave Maria University. He studies and teaches on the works of Thomas Aquinas, Chesterton, Tolkien, and he wrote an article for Catholic Exchange called Why Recreational Drug Use is Immoral. So come back on the other side of the break as we continue to engage this fascinating topic. You're listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray.
Courage, an apostolate of the Catholic Church, ministers to persons with same-sex attractions and their loved ones. They also have an outreach called Encourage, which ministers to relatives, spouses, and friends of persons with same-sex attractions. Endorsed by the Pontifical Council for the Family, our beloved John Paul II said of this ministry, "Courage is doing the work of God." Please visit the Courage website, couragerc.org, to learn more and find a Courage chapter near you.
Experience the incredible story of a woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica, grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Canton, Ohio during the Great Depression. Rita's father abandoned the family before she was 5 years old. Her early years of trial were compounded by a debilitating illness until she was healed by Jesus through a woman named Rhoda Wise. That healing set her life on a course that would ultimately change the world. Learn the amazing story of Rita Rizzo at the Mother Angelica Museum in her hometown of Canton, Ohio. Go to www.motherangelicamuseum.com. Be inspired. Plan your visit now at motherangelicamuseum.com.
People are surprised to learn that natural family planning couples have a lower divorce rate than couples who use other methods of family planning. NFP couples report better communication that improves marital intimacy and respect. For information on how you and your spouse can learn natural family planning in English or Spanish, see the Couple to Couple League's website at ccli.org.
Hello and welcome back to the Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray, and today we're having, I think this is a fascinating conversation with author Matthew McKenna. He's a PhD candidate in theology at Ave Maria University. He studies and teaches on the works of St. Thomas Aquinas, G.K. Chesterton, J.R.R. Tolkien, and we're talking about a topic that has certainly been in the news a lot over the past few years, especially why recreational drug use is immoral. He wrote this article for Catholic Exchange back at the beginning of July. And it just, I've had a lot of conversations on this with students, with people in general, especially when things like this come up on the ballot, the political ballot. And so we've had if you missed the first half of the show, please go back and listen to it on demand on the podcast, because he lays out some great ideas in that opening there that we did, the opening segment. But this last segment, we're actually going to dig in. He gives us 3 reasons in his article why recreational drug use is immoral. And so welcome back, Matt, to the second half of the show, and I'm going to let you jump right on in with that first reason that you give so we can talk more about that.
Awesome. Thanks for having me back. So this first reason that recreational drug use is immoral, this is the one you're going to find most commonly throughout the Catholic tradition and basically in the Bible as well, but applied to alcohol there. And it's pretty simple. First, recreational drugs, like getting high, cause you to lose the usage of your reason, right? You can't think straight when you're drunk or when you're high. Mm-hmm. Now, that, of course, is an issue because we are rational beings. Like the classic Catholic philosophical definition of a human being is a rational animal. Of course, scripturally, we'd say this is the imago Dei. We're made in the image and likeness of God. When St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, starts thinking about what it means to be in the image of God, what that means, what Genesis is saying, he concludes it means our rational nature. Now, this kind of makes sense if you think very scripturally. Thomas is exegeting scripture when he does this. Adam was made on the 6th day of creation. Adam and Eve were made on the 6th day of creation, the same day as the animals. The animals are, of course, not in the image of God, but we are. Okay, so how are we significantly, substantially different from the animals? Well, go back to the philosophical definition. We're rational, they're not. We're both animals. We both have bodies. Of course, we're not just animals, but we do have bodies like the animals, but we're very different from them. It's precisely in our ability to know and our ability to love. And it's precisely those abilities, our ability to know and to love, that let us have relationship with God, right? That let us have great relationship, intimate relationship with each other and with God. And so, like, what it means to be a human being, to be in the image and likeness of God, is to be rational. To be able to know and to love at, like, not just a physical level, but a spiritual level as well.
Right.
So temporarily even destroying these abilities for the sake of just fun, pleasure, is very contrary to human flourishing. So it's contrary to human nature. It's almost reverting back to a beast. It's trying to become more animal-like in a way. It's giving up the usages of these faculties for fun, for pleasure. That's very contradictory to our nature, to our purpose, to how we're supposed to engage with reality. We're not supposed to engage with reality on a merely animal level. We're supposed to engage with it on a spiritual level, with our reason, with our intellect and our wills, with our hearts. But of course, alcohol prevents you from doing that. So almost like, and drugs too, like recreational drug use, getting high, getting drunk prevents you from doing that. And so when you lose the use of your reason, you are basically, it's a very animalistic act.
That's true. That's very true. And because the ability to reason is our nature, is what makes us, like you said, makes us different. So anytime we try to take that away in some way, we are lowering who God created us to be. And I think we have a really hard time with that, I think, as a society. And I think that idea, when we lose our ability to reason, we also open ourselves up to a lot more temptation, don't we?
Oh, yes, because it's precisely with our reasons, right, that we make decisions, that we choose the good and reject the evil. And so when we don't have the use of our reason, we make bad decisions. Like, this is such a stereotypical joke in like sitcoms or something, or like television. Somebody gets drunk and makes bad decisions. Like, yeah, that's what happens when you lose the ability to reason. You do really bad things that you regret, that harm you and other people.
Yeah, and I that's one of the things I try to kind of hit home with my students, because I think so often, and, I don't know what your experience has been, but so often when kids get away from home and are living on their own, especially at 18 or 19, they feel this like, oh, good, nobody's telling me what to do, how to act, and so they start having these parties where they get drunk and, and they don't realize how they're opening their lives to all these other possibility of problems down the road, right? Sexual encounters that they're not ready for, that they don't, they just, all kinds of things. They do things sometimes they don't even remember. And it's like, really? This is, you think this is what God created you for? It's just, I'm just kind of, and I understand the allure. I mean, you have a drink, especially. Yeah.
I also have concupiscence.
Yes, exactly. And so the idea, though, I think is being able, especially when we talk, about alcohol, and we kind of had a part of this conversation in the first half of the show, but, how you bring virtue to that is the sense of self-discipline, is that I know I'm only going to have one glass of wine tonight. That's it when I'm out with friends, no more, and that's really... That self-discipline is the piece that not only helps us in this situation with alcohol, but it helps us to know then that if I can do that, then this discipline can be, this virtue of discipline can be, taken into every area of my life. And I, how we teach people to do that, and especially young people do that, I think is so important. How do you see that being done around the kids that you deal with, the young people?
I think like the virtue of like St. Thomas would call it sobriety, using these inebriating substances well. I really think it only actually is taught ever at like in very good Catholic communities. I have one of my classmates in my PhD program is from Ireland, and because there's a history of like alcoholism and stuff in his family, he took some like Catholic. There's like some Catholic group in Ireland. They take like a solemn oath never to drink ever in their whole lives, and like he wears like a pin every single day of his life. And when he came to America to study, he said this is the first time in his whole life he'd ever seen alcohol be used well. Like all his friends in Ireland, everybody was like the normal thing was go out, get utterly wasted, like 15 beers a night.
Oh, wow.
I can't even comprehend that much liquid. Like that's just
the
volume of liquid that is. I don't like. I would look pregnant. Like I don't know how that works.
Right.
But it only seems like the culture doesn't have any sense of the disciplined, virtuous use of alcohol, using it well, as in great moderation, to actually help facilitate good social encounters, as opposed to replacing good social encounters with just alcohol and then using alcohol to like fuel bad decisions. So I think it's only really going to be found in a good Catholic community where, first of all, there's recognition that like drunkenness, like losing the use of your reason, is a sin of grave matter. You shouldn't do it. So if you go out Saturday night and get wasted, well, you can't receive communion Sunday morning. So like I think only there do we find it being taught at all. I think the way it's taught is going to be like, first you have to actually like tell like students and kids, teenagers, that like this is bad, this isn't good for you. It's bad because it makes you lose the use of your reason. You're a rational animal, made in the image and likeness of God, so that's bad. It's contrary to your nature. And then also, of course, demonstrating the good, proper use of alcohol, like in moderation. So living by example.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think because reason it's not just about the spiritual realm of things, it's about the physical realm of things, how we engage the physical world. And so we've got to talk about the health effects, the social effects, because that's all part of the good use of our reason. And so kind of the second reason that you give for recreational drugs being immoral is the serious health risk. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. I think this is one of the reasons. First of all, this reason is the most popular one in like the secular culture. Like the reason people want drugs to be illegal, that minority that want drugs to be illegal, it's mainly due to like, this will kill you. You can take too much of the substance accidentally, and then you're dead. So like, and that's like not to be flippant, but like, it's really simple. This thing will just like, to be clear, this thing will kill you if you take a little too much of it, or if you take it improperly. So like, it's super, super dangerous. So it's really bad. Even if it doesn't kill you, it still is going to utterly wreck your health and leave your body very, very broken and damaged. Even something like marijuana, which they see ODs, overdoses, on marijuana. I'm actually not sure if you can die of overdose by marijuana.
I don't know.
Not sure you can. But even so, like marijuana, even if it might maybe have some medicinal effects, there might be some evidence for that. There's tons and tons of evidence that if you use marijuana a lot, there are long-term, irreparable or irreversible, at least, changes to your brain. Not for the better. So irreversible damage to your brain from long-term marijuana use, especially for males too. One example of this is like the motivation receptors in your brain get damaged, and then you are unable to be motivated like a normal human being anymore. And that kind of leads to this whole like stereotype of the lazy marijuana kid who's high.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean,
and of course, this is.
Go ahead.
You go ahead. This is, of course, a reason it's immoral and sinful because we have a duty to preserve and take care of our life. It's like one of the basic principles of like the natural law is self-preservation, right? Mm-hmm. And this isn't just some kind of naturalistic animals want to preserve and lengthen their lives, therefore we do too. No, it's life is a gift from God. Mm-hmm. You didn't create yourself. You were brought into existence by your parents cooperating with God. Your life is a gift from God who made you to live a certain way and accomplish certain things that we need with him. Therefore, you have to take care of your life, preserve it, and this includes your health, because we are animals. We have bodies. We're not just a soul. But the resurrection of the body is crucial to our faith. And to your body, you have at least a basic obligation to take care of your basic health. That's not to say, like, you ate McDonald's once, you sinner, go confession. Nothing like that extreme, but, like, you need to take care of your health. And a substance that is horrible potential risk to your health, then you only take it for fun. Nope, that's not going to be good. That's going to be immoral.
Yeah. And I just ran across an article. I just want to, and you may have seen this one, but I just want to share this with the audience as a whole. It's on the recreational use of marijuana and some of the effects. And it talks about just what you said. It especially affects the brain. And it says a recent French study suggested that cannabis use raises the risk of heart attack and stroke more than cocaine. And it says a Canadian study found that dementia risk is connected to cannabis-related hospital visits in older individuals. And there's a guy who in a clinic in California, a doctor who's been doing brain imaging in his clinics over years. And so he says that this is a quote from him, a doctor, it's interesting. His name is Daniel Amen. I love that. Amen. Amen, like we say in church. Yeah. But his quote is, we've been lied to that marijuana is innocuous, that marijuana is good medicine. And I think for some people it can be helpful, but teenagers who use it or people in their 20s have a higher incidence of anxiety, depression, suicide, and psychosis. I read that and I thought, oh my gosh, excuse me, I notice much higher anxiety in my students now than I did 20 years ago. And I'm thinking, I think a lot of times kids might think, well, this will mellow me out, calm me down. But research is showing just the opposite. And they also show that it that marijuana users sustain more lung damage than cigarette users. And I think that's interesting. We've made such a big deal about getting rid of cigarettes and tobacco, and yet, let's pass recreational drug use.
Yep.
Just doesn't seem reasonable to me. So,
Nope.
Matt, I want to get into this last one because this, I think, your third reason, you're right. I think the second reason is something most people go, yeah, I get it. If you show them the science, the statistics, the research, they'll go, okay, yeah, so it's not good for me, but I do a lot of things that aren't good for me. So I eat a lot of stuff that's not good for me, right? But your third reason is a reason that I don't think a lot of people would understand in the realm of morality. So talk to us about your third reason as to why it's immoral.
Yeah, the third reason, this is, so to speak, like the more original with me reason. It's more like my own idea, but it's really not my idea. As we'll see, it's just St. Thomas Aquinas and the Church Fathers' idea. So the third reason is that recreational drug use is the wrong way to seek pleasure in itself. So the act of taking drugs for the sake of pleasure is in itself wrong. And in order to understand this, we have to first understand what do we mean when we say pleasure? What is pleasure? How does it work? How is it supposed to work? Why does God make things pleasurable? Mm-hmm. So according to St. Thomas Aquinas, and he's drawing on the Church Fathers, mainly St. John Damascene here, pleasure is what he calls a passion of the soul. And this is just a movement of your appetites, a movement of the powers of your soul, the ability of your soul to act and desire and know and love and do things like that. So pleasure particularly is the passion or emotion of your will and your appetites responding to the attainment of a good thing. So like when you attain some good or you do some good thing, your will responds with pleasure. So you get pleasure as like the reward of doing good. Your appetites respond pleasurably when you do a good thing, accomplish a good thing, have a union with some good object out there. Now, of course, the purpose of this is, right, to help us, it's like a motivation for us to seek the good and avoid the evil. Pain, the opposite passion of pleasure, is a union with an evil. When some evil thing is thrust upon us, we can't avoid it, or we do some bad thing, we experience pain. And that's, of course, motivation for us to avoid the bad. So the passion, the fact that things are pleasurable or are painful, is a gift from God to help us attain the good and avoid the evil. Like there was a study done, they gave people some kind of like neural blocker to prevent them from they took away feeling in their hands, so they had no more feeling of pain or sensation at all in their hands anymore. Mm-hmm. And then they gave them like complex, difficult tasks to do, screwing in a light bulb at a weird angle, or like trying to hammer in a nail that wouldn't quite stay still. And then what we found out is people who had their sensation in their hands taken away by like neural blockers and stuff like that or whatever, ended up like doing the task accomplishing the task in a way that actually hurts them. Like they dealt damage, so they didn't care if they hammered their thumb in, and so because it didn't hurt, and so therefore they ended up hitting their thumb a lot more times, and so hurting their thumb a lot more than those people who were doing the task normally. Right. So the fact that things are pleasurable and painful actually does God's system works. Surprise, surprise. It actually helps us do the good and avoid the evil. Now, recreational drug use, like the whole point, of course, is recreation is fun, it's pleasure.
Right.
But you're not doing anything good or attaining any good thing. There's no good object you're having union with. So you're like bypassing this whole process of the way we're supposed to attain pleasure and chemically stimulating dopamine and stuff in your brain. And so the pleasure itself, it's kind of fake. You haven't done anything to earn, to get this intense level of pleasure that recreational drug use provides.
So, Matt, people, and we would say this with alcohol too, I think, but people would say, well, I come home at night and I'm stressed out from work and I'm tired, so I smoke a joint, or so I have a couple drinks. And they would say that the good that they're trying to achieve is to relax, to de-stress. Talk to us about that. Is that a good? Is this a legitimate means to the end of de-stressing? Give us some insight here.
Yeah, so that's already looking at the distinction between the ends and the means is good there, because like the end of de-stressing from a hard day of work, whatever, that's of course a good end. And
Right.
even an acceptable means would be something like pleasure, having a little pleasure. St. Thomas Aquinas, of course, that says like pleasure is a cure for sorrow. If you're bummed out, like go get an ice cream cone. That'll make you feel a little bit better. The issue, though, is something along, kind of, you already mentioned this earlier, recreational drugs, like especially marijuana, don't in the long term actually de-stress you, right? People who use marijuana, like you mentioned earlier, have more anxiety actually. So in the short term, it might seem like it's calming you in the moments, but it actually leads to more stress in your life. So like it's not actually accomplishing the end. And then also we can just say, well, yeah, you might want to de-stress, and that's good, but maybe you should actually do something that recreates you. Like recreation fun is what's supposed to recreate us. Like recreation comes from the word creation, right? And recreating. So what we do for fun, for pleasure, to de-stress, to leisurely activities in the weekend are supposed to actually renew us and make us stronger again. So St. Thomas Aquinas, when he talks about the purpose of play, he names a virtue called eutrapelia. He's getting the name from Aristotle, but it's still good. And he says, play is supposed to renew our minds so that we are able then to go back and do our work. So a lot of times, like in the world, in America, we seem to have this idea of I work during the week so I can play on the weekend. And St. Thomas Aquinas says that's backwards. No. Instead, we play on the weekend so that we can work during the week. Now, of course, it's not to say the purpose of life is to run the rat race, make a lot of money. No, but it's to say work is actually part of our human vocation. We're supposed to do good things, to help people, to be productive members of society out of love for our fellow man, right? So Adam and Eve were put in the garden and told to work before the fall. After the fall in Genesis 3, work now becomes harder or more painful for all of us, but we are supposed to do it even before the fall. Of course, John Paul II reflects beautiful about this in his encyclical Laborum Exercens. Does that make sense a little bit there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it does. I think because I think part of the issue so often is, the Catholic Church sometimes got a bad rap when it came to pleasure, like nothing should be pleasurable. Everything should be suffering, carry that cross. Don't have, don't have any fun kind of thing,
Yeah.
And so
we would not want to sound like that at all.
Exactly. And I think that's why virtue is such a beautiful way to engage all of these kinds of things that we're talking about, whether we're talking about, recreational drug use. And I like, and what we're trying to do today is kind of tease out what might make this a little bit different than alcohol. But again, alcohol can be misused too. And we have such an addictive society nowadays. We talk about sex addiction, we talk about technology addictions, we talk about all kinds of addictions. But we're got about 4 minutes left in the show, Matt, a little under. As I look at this, I don't think every addiction is created equal in the sense that there is some differences in these addictions, that what we talk about with recreational drug use might be a little different than we talk about with alcohol or with sexual addictions or with technological addictions. Or am I wrong here? Are they all kind of alike and we need to deal with them in the same way? I don't know.
They definitely all have similarities. Like that's kind of why we use the same term addiction to describe them all. Like maybe an alternative term might be vice. Like if virtue is the habituation towards the good, vice is the habituation towards evil. Now, of course, virtue and vice aren't purely spiritual realities. Like it's an actual inclination in ourselves to the good or to the evil, because we're body and soul. Like virtue and vice exist in our soul, but also are going to like affect our bodies too, a little bit in some way or another. So you could might think of addiction as a kind of vice. Now, of course, some of these addictions are very medical, actually. Especially you might think like the person who gets addicted after one usage. Like Like, that's not really a vice. That's almost purely a medical condition there. But some of these are, especially the behavioral addictions, so sex addiction, certain social media usage, stuff like that. Those behavioral addictions, while they are addictions, and they definitely have a medical specs with regard to like brain chemistry, et cetera. They're also like a vice. It might be another helpful way to think about them too. So all addictions are similar, but also distinct. So both similarities and differences.
Okay, that helps, because I think a lot of times we read something and then we try to generalize it, and sometimes it doesn't work in its generalizations with everything that we're trying to apply it to. So I appreciate that. Well, Matt, we are already at the end of our show. This has gone so fast, and I thank you for writing this article and making us think a little bit deeper about these subjects. I think sometimes we just kind of, to each his own, and we go on from there. So thanks again so much for taking time to write this. I think it really engaged me in thinking about this, and especially that point about pleasure. What is pleasure about, and what does it help us with, and what's its purpose? And so when you bring in Aquinas and people like that, you're certainly bringing in the big guns. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I'll let everyone know today our guest was Matthew McKenna, PhD candidate in theology at Ave Maria University. He studies and teaches on the works of St. Thomas Aquinas, Chesterton, Tolkien, all very familiar names here on this show. And we were discussing an article he wrote on at Catholic Exchange, if you want to read it, Why Recreational Drug Use is Immoral. He gives us some great information and thoughts and insights to chew on. So, let's spend some time thinking about how do we obtain pleasure in this world, and how do we do it in a way that I like the term that Matthew used. How do we use it in a way to recreate ourselves, and to recreate ourselves in the image of God? Thanks for listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Odie Murray.